Hi, beautiful people. Welcome to the Fort Salem Library, where we read you your fanfiction. So sit down or don't, relax or don't, and enjoy these stories in a way you have not before. We at Fort Salem Library do not own Motherland Fort Salem or any of the related characters. The Motherland Fort Salem series is created by Elliot Lawrence and owned by Freeform. This story is a work of fanfiction and is meant for entertainment only. We are not making any profit from these stories. All rights of the original Motherland Fort Salem story belong to Freeform. We also do not own Hasiera or any of its original characters and storylines. We did, however, get permission from the author to read their story. This story was created and written by Dalantzaria, and you can find the link in our show notes. This story is being read to you by Dani.
Hasiera. Elaine had just turned around and run. Not that Tally could blame her. She didn't know what Alder had done, but somehow she wasn't surprised. How could she be? She had seen the woman angry. She had been the cause of her ire. It was terrifying. She watched, frozen, as Alder moved towards the trailer door and opened it. She barely heard the woman say they didn't need to worry about the thief. Didn't care to go inside when Alder motioned for her to do so. Her own mouth was moving before she could stop it, an echo of words she didn't even realize she still meant. I missed you so much. Blue eyes found her own, as soft as they had been the first time she had uttered those words. Like, like you've never missed anyone in your life? Those were the exact words. She had remembered. Tally nodded, trying so hard to will her bottom lip to stop trembling and those tears to stop swelling. I know the feeling. It was so sure, so honest, and so fucking soft. And it was all she needed to hear before she did what she had wanted to do in that damned infirmary so long ago. What felt like lifetimes. She closed the space between them and gently grabbed the back of Alder's neck with both hands before pulling Sarah Alder down until their lips were pressed together. The feeling of those lips, the lingering taste of salt and whiskey, and the tears she could feel spilling freely from her eyes. Goddess, she burned. This, this is what she hadn't realized she had needed. This woman she had betrayed and broken before having to say goodbye without even realizing how desperately she needed her. Alder was frozen in Tally's grasp, and for a moment Tally feared that the woman returned to her didn't feel the same, didn't want and burn the way Tally found herself doing. And yet, as she moved to pull away, a strong arm wrapped tightly around her waist and pulled her flush against Alder as the second long pale hand found its way to her face. The kiss deepened at the movement, and she couldn't help gasping into it. General! Alder pulled away, pressing their foreheads together in the way Tally had so often craved without even knowing the reason why. Sarah. My name is Sarah. Use it, please. Use my name. She wasn't sure if the sound that left her was another gasp or a sob. All she knew was that it formed the name as she dragged those lips back down to her. Sarah. Sarah moaned into her as she pulled away, and before Tally had time to even think about what was happening, she found herself spun around until her back was pressed against the trailer. And then those lips were back, and it burned with a fire that ignited all the pent-up passion Tally had buried. Which is why, when Sarah pulled away again, Tally found her lips trying to follow. Tell me to stop. Tally, please tell me to stop. Goddess, what was she asking? No, no, even if this was the only time she could have her, she wasn't going to ask her to stop. Sarah, please, please, I need you. I... Tally could see it. That moment, what tiny amount of resolve Sarah still had snap into pieces. The woman surged forward, her lips finding Tally's neck, and goddess, the heat of her center rose and grew, and she wanted to scream. Her own hands were buried in that beautiful hair, gripping hard enough it had to hurt, but she couldn't seem to let go, especially when Sarah bit down on her collarbone. More. Tally groaned through the heat tearing through her, and hands found the buttons of her sweater. In an instant between breaths, the sweater was pushed from her shoulders and onto the dirty ground of the alleyway. Goddess, the place between her legs had its own heartbeat, one that beat faster and hotter as Sarah's hands worked their way up the shirt she wore and onto her breasts. A thumb brushed over her right nipple, right as Sarah's lips returned to her own, and oh, fuck. This woman could kiss, and that hand in her shirt was a working of all its own, causing that pulling heat to deepen and rise with every practice twist. She barely noticed the hand working her pants button open, not until that hand dipped inside and cupped her throbbing center over her panties. Panties she knew she would never be able to wear again, as a gush of wetness soaked through them. Sarah must have felt it, moaning against Tally, as Tally tried to rut against the hand against her. Anything. She would take anything to chase this building pleasure. She did scream when Sarah's hand shifted up and suddenly was on the inside of those ruined panties. I've missed you, Sarah whispered into her lips as a finger circled Tally's clit, and she moaned. She hadn't realized the tears hadn't stopped, even as the pleasure built higher and higher with every movement. I've missed you. That finger shifted, and Tally found herself circling Sarah's torso with her legs and lifting off the ground as the single digit slipped inside of her. I've missed you. A second finger joined the first, gently stretching and curling as Sarah's palm rubbed against her clit before moving away again. It wasn't enough. Goddess, it wasn't enough. She needed more. Fuck. Sarah. Fuck. Sarah's fingers withdrew, leaving her empty. She whimpered, her head falling against Sarah's shoulder as the hand still up her shirt left to hold her. She was still crying. It was a belated thought, one that fell to the wayside in lieu of this pleasure. She felt the stutter of Sarah's breath against her witch mark, the only warning before the fingers plunged inside her again. Hallie moaned, heaving hot breaths into the bare skin of Sarah's neck. Goodness, it had been so fucking long since someone had been inside her. And even then, nothing could ever compare to this. Tally found herself getting lost in the feeling of those fingers as they fucked into her, curling against that place she couldn't find half the time as Sarah's other hand kneaded her ass where Sarah held her up. Tally forgot the camarilla, the marshals, all of it, in lieu of the fingers moving inside of her. She could feel her body responding in a way it never had before, clinging desperately to the fingers inside of her as she attempted to rut into the palm hovering just above her clit. It was all she needed. She was so close. Just a little bit of pressure there, and she would be gone. I missed you, Sarah breathed out as her fingers stretched and curled inside of her. Tally could hear it, the same desperation she felt, in that voice that had haunted her. She shuddered. She was so close. Harder, please. Sarah, please. She rutted against Sarah's torso, her hands tightening in that wonderful soft hair the closer she got to falling over the edge. Sarah's moan reverberated through her entire body, as if it was Tally's own. And honestly, maybe it was. Sarah's hand moved harder, driving Tally closer and closer, until finally her thumb shifted and began to gently graze against Tally's clit. That, combined with the fingers curling inside of her, was all it took to send her barreling over the edge. I've missed you with every breath I have taken. Was all she could choke out before biting into the small bit of skin exposed on Sarah's neck to keep from screaming, as Sarah fucked her through wave after wave of pleasure. She tightened and released over and over again as those fingers moved slower and slower before finally slowing to a stop inside of her. She wasn't sure how long Sarah held her there against the exterior wall of Elaine's trailer in the dark alleyway, as Tally relished that delicious sensitivity left behind, as she panted and clung to Sarah Alder. It could have been seconds, or minutes, or hours. She could be told it had been days, and she would have believed it. But all too soon, she felt the fingers withdraw from her, drawing a whimper from her lips, and found herself being lowered to the ground. Sarah's eyes were shut when Tally lifted her head from the crook of the woman's neck. She tried to ignore the bite, obvious on Sarah's collar. Her mark. Sarah, she asked, and the name felt so heavy in her mouth, her own hand sliding from the thick mussed hair to cup the woman's cheek, as Sarah's bottom lip trembled, as if trying to keep from crying the way Tally still was. Lips that had been on Tally's own mere moments ago. We need to find the seed. The first song. Elaine had a piece of it, she said, but she didn't pull away. Instead, she opened her eyes, and Tally met those blue, blue eyes that glistened with unshed tears. They looked as utterly wild and unhinged as Tally was sure her own did. She found herself nodding. Oh, goddess, what had she been thinking? They had, oh, goddess, oh, goddess. Oh, goddess, what had she done? This is definitely not what Abigail had meant about finding someone. And yet, even with the panic, Tally couldn't find a hint of regret. Not for this. Sarah was moving before she could process any of it, picking up Tally's falling sweater and opening the door to the trailer again before motioning for Tally to go first. She found the seed that Elaine had used in the bar quickly. Her sight was going crazy as it rose and fell like waves of pleasure that Sarah Alder had just given her. Goddess, she felt powerful, more than she ever had with Garrett, as if she could look forward and backward and see all of everything, all at once. It was pure, the seed locked in a lip balm container. And yet, as she turned around to see Sarah bent over in pain, she nearly forgot it all. Are you all right? She asked, reaching out a hand that faltered in the space between them. A nod. A lie. Tally! Oh, goddess, that was Abigail. She didn't even realize she hadn't given the seat to Sarah as she ran out of the trailer toward her sister's panicking voice. She didn't expect to find the marshals with Abby and Adil and Kalita bound. She didn't expect to run back into the camper, back to Sarah, only to find it empty. The only proof Sarah had been there at all was the way Tally's center still pulsed, and the way her power roiled from the pleasure she had received from the woman mere minutes before, and the horse sweater gently placed over a chair. She took her sweater and pulled it on before she slipped the capsuled seed into her pants pocket with shaking hands, and she left the trailer. She wouldn't tell, not even Abigail. This was hers and Sarah's. Whatever this was that had happened between them was theirs. There were more important things to deal with, anyways. She wasn't all that surprised to be reunited with Scylla and Nicta at the house the marshals brought them to. None of them told Nicta or Scylla about being found by Alder, about Sarah being alive, and Tally didn't tell Abigail about what had happened in that alley behind the bar. It wasn't until 7 hours later, curled on an old couch in the house they had been brought to by the marshals, with Scylla and Abigail in a comfort cuddle pile, when she pulled her hair into a ponytail that she realized. Holy hell, Red, the fuck did you fuck? Nicta asked, eyeing the newly visible witch mark with a smirk that wasn't dimpled. Oh, goddess. Her gaze spun away from the older woman and onto Abigail at the words. She hadn't told Abigail, and she had forgotten that there was proof. What are you talking about, Baton? Her sister asked, glancing between the spree founder's false face and Tally's, which was slowly turning red. Red's witch mark looks borderline radioactive. She glared at Nicta, trying so hard not to keep the panic from overtaking her. Show me. Now. She didn't seem to have much of a choice as Abigail was grabbing her face and twisting it until both she and Scylla could see the way her witch mark shimmered. And when Abigail's hands left her face and her own eyes found Abby's, she could see the moment it processed. She could tell the exact moment Abigail put the pieces together, her own widening eyes doing little to help keep the secret in. She cringed the minute the surprise turned to shock. Holy shit! You fucked Alder? Nicta choked on whatever booze she had stolen from the house's bar. Scylla stiffened beside Tally. Abigail just kept going. Tally Craven, this is not what I meant when I said find someone!
Please find the fanfiction you just listened to on Archive of Our Own and leave the author some love. Without them, this wouldn't be possible, and we want to thank them from the bottoms of our hearts for creating these amazing stories and keeping the show alive.